Okay, wonderful. Well, I think we'll go ahead and make a start. On behalf of CANIE, the Climate Action Network for International Educators, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the launch of the CANIE Accord today. My name is Robin Shields. I'm a professor of education at the University of Bristol, and I'll be moderating the event today. Our session will build upon CANIE's Week of Climate Action held in November of 2021, alongside the COP26 conference in Glasgow. As you'll see, we have some hashtag for today's event, CANIE Accord. So if you're following us on social media or use social media, do tweet about today's event or post about today's event, let others know what's going on. And just a quick note to say the session is recorded so others can access it if they couldn't join. Do be aware if you make any comments that they would be posted, but that's fine. It's a friendly environment, so don't let that deter you from participating. So, during this week of climate action, CANIE facilitated a discussion among a group of leaders in international higher education. And it's great to see that many of these distinguished individuals are here today. This discussion was used to develop a protocol to coordinate climate action in international higher education, which we are launching today as the CANIE Accord. The need for the CANIE Accord could not be stronger. Since COP26, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has released its sixth report, which stated, quote, "Human-induced climate change has caused widespread adverse impacts and related losses and damages to nature and people." It continues, noting that the most vulnerable people and systems are disproportionately affected by these changes. It also cites, quote, "irreversible impacts as natural and human systems are pushed beyond their ability to adapt." And the report emphasizes the connections between the climate, biological ecosystems, and human society, advocating, quote, "solutions that are feasible and conform to principles of justice." International education is deeply implicated in this picture. We are both part of the problem, not least through our reliance on unsustainable air travel, but we're also part of a potential solution through the skills we impart to students, the example we set, and the intercultural values that we promote. Given this call, we hope that the CANIE Accord will coordinate, strengthen, and support a socially just response to the climate emergency in the field of international education. Today's session will introduce you to the Accord in the hopes that your institution will become a signatory. Members of CANIE's board and I will update you on activities since the COP26 Week of Climate Action. We'll introduce key aspects of the CANIE Accord, and most importantly, we'll tell you how you can join the effort by becoming a signatory. We'll also be asking for your input through two polls and a breakout discussion. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that I am joining you from Minneapolis today on the traditional ancestral homelands of the Dakota people. I recognize their sovereignty on this land and my position as a guest. I also further acknowledge that my employer, the University of Bristol, was initially funded by the Merchant Venture Society, which benefited from the subjugation of Indigenous peoples, in particular through the transatlantic slave trade. By recognizing these past injustices, I commit to creating a better future. I invite you to post your own land acknowledgements in the chat as appropriate. And with that, it's my great pleasure to hand over to CJ Tremblay, Vice President of CANIE's board, who will update us on CANIE's activities since COP26 in November.
Thank you so much, Robin. It is such an honor to be launching the CANIE Accord, which is the program formerly known as the Glasgow Protocol to some of you. Alongside you and alongside the rest of the team. And a big hello and welcome to everyone who is joining us. Thank you for being here. My name is CJ Tremblay, and as Robin mentioned, I'm the Vice President of the CANIE Global Board, and I'm joining today from Vancouver in Canada. And Vancouver is located in the unceded and stolen territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And this is relevant because it anchors the work that we do not just for climate action, but also climate justice. As we know, in Canada and around the world, the Indigenous community is disproportionately harmed by climate change. So it's with that we take these steps today. And many of you are here today, not as first-time participants at CANIE events, but as supporters who are keen to take action. And I want to say thank you for that. We have come a long way since our first International Education Summit in May of 2020. I mean, heck, we've come a long way since our COP26 Climate Action Week in November. As many of you know, CANIE is a volunteer-run organization, but sometimes I get the question, what does that mean? What does that look like? And so I want to shed a little bit on what that means and where we've come from since the COP26. We have 3 active and growing chapters, one in Europe, Oceania, and Americas. We have 6 global working groups, one on climate justice, marketing, content, fundraising, global events, and podcast. There's a 12-member working global board and 130 plus active participants in our volunteer Slack workspace. And that was a lot of volunteer energy that we've been able to grow and channel since COP26. And with that energy, we've seen the growth of the size and activity of those working groups and chapters in that Slack space. Our climate justice working group has been super inspiring in sharing loads of knowledge, and they're actually hosting an event next week around climate justice and issues around carbon offsets. So you can check that out on the website. The marketing working group has launched a new website at our new URL, CANIE.org. No more dash in the middle. And you'll hear a lot more about that in the coming weeks and months in terms of functionality and how that website is designed to support you. The fundraising group has come together to plan on how to help CANIE have more resources to support your work and to continue to keep that accessible. The chapters are growing with every single one of their meetings, and I encourage you to check out their activities. And the Slack workspace is where people are sharing articles, ideas, events, courses, sometimes organizing around conferences. So it's really exciting. And that's like on top of the 1,400 plus audience across more than 750 institutions around the world who want to stay in the loop to receive CANIE communications, as we all work together towards our vision of an international education sector that is sort of net zero by 2030. So I mentioned our new website and URL earlier, and CANIE.org, which is really important as we move into our next phase, is actually why we're here today, the launch of the CANIE Accord. The CANIE Accord is our key program to move us forward. It is accessed, submitted, and managed through our new website. And like all things CANIE, it's free. And all it needs to be successful is the willpower of those in our sector to choose change and to choose action. So I'm so glad to be here today and thank everyone for being here as we take this next step together. I also just want to take a quick second to recognize that P. Tulia Nikula is in the room, who is one of our CANIE co-founders and current member of the board, and one of the reasons we're all here today. So thank you for being here. It's very exciting. Over to you, Robin.
Great, thanks, CJ. So now we know a little bit more about CANIE and the wonderful things it's doing, the very positive environment for climate action that it creates. Let's find out a bit more about us, about the people in today's session and where we are at in our climate action. So I'm going to present the first poll, which is on the activities related to climate change that you might already be undertaking in your organization. Specifically, the poll is going to ask whether you advocate for climate action within your organization, whether you set decarbonization targets, whether you replace physical meetings with online ones like this one where possible, whether you implement flexible working strategies and working from home strategies, whether you replace printed materials with online equivalents, and whether you support climate literacy and professional development in your organization. So as we're presenting and telling you a little bit more about the CANIE Accord, do complete the poll just to take kind of the temperature in the room. Where are we at right now? Now, don't worry, it's anonymous. It's not about naming and shaming what you're doing. If your organization's not active in any of these, it's okay to say so. The goal of the CANIE Accord is to support you in taking climate action based on where you're at today. not to set standards that we can't achieve as a sector. So while you complete the poll, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Adrienne Fusek from CANIE's board. Adrienne has been deeply involved in the drafting of the Accord and coordinated multiple rounds of our Leaders Forum. She'll now talk us through key points of the CANIE Accord. Over to you, Adrienne.
Thank you so much, Robin. And thank you everyone for being here. It's very exciting to see you all and to know that you are all supportive of this initiative. So the CANIE Accord is a non-binding memorandum of understanding meant to align the international education sector with the Paris Agreement and the ambition of limiting global temperature rise and the consequences of climate change. That's basically it. So the purpose of the Accord is to strengthen and accelerate the response of the international education sector to the climate crisis. It contains 3 guiding principles, which you see on your screen. And these principles are general statements for organizations to address in the context of their own operations and environment. So the Leaders Forum discussions in November really centered around these principles, and their wording has been carefully developed in consultation with the forum participants and members of CANIE's global network. So what you see here are the headings of the principles, and you can view the actual content in the document itself on CANIE's website. So principle 1 is to take immediate action. So an important component of principle 1 is that international educators ought to leverage our influence within our organizations to align strategies and policies with global decarbonization targets. Principle 2 is to collaborate and innovate as a global sector to reduce emissions while supporting students' global learning and their capacity for climate action. And principle 3, commit signatories to centering climate justice in our actions. So our climate solutions must aim to advance individual and collective well-being and reduce inequalities and deprivations. So again, you can see the principles in full in the Accord itself. There we go. So here you have a visual representation of the CANIE Accord contents. As you can see, it's divided into 8 articles or sections. So the first 3 articles contain the front matter, and we just take a look at Article 3, which addresses the purpose and principles. Articles 4 through 8 contain a list of 70 climate actions separated into broad areas that you see on the slide. And it's important to emphasize that these topics or areas were themes that came out of the Leaders Forum discussions. So each of the 70 climate actions has an ambition level of basic, better, or best. And the purpose in doing that is to ensure that any organization in the sector can sign up while also challenging itself to be as ambitious as possible. So it doesn't matter what stage your organization is in terms of its climate action journey, the Accord is meant to be approachable and the actions achievable. So you may have noticed that the email that CANIE sent to you earlier contained 2 documents. So the CANIE Accord and the Glasgow paper. So the Glasgow paper was created to capture all of the great content that came out of the Leaders Forum discussions. There was just way too much to include in the CANIE Accord and too technical to show up in that Accord. So the sections of the Glasgow paper correspond with the articles in the CANIE Accord, and they provide context for those actions. So the Glasgow paper also situates the Leaders Forum conversations within the current research and international recommendations for climate action. It also contains an extensive reference list. So if you're one of those people who likes to go and do all that extra reading, there's a ton of info there for you to check out, as well as a list of all the contributors to both of the documents. So that's a brief overview of the CANIE Accord and the Glasgow paper. Both of them are available on the CANIE website, and you should have received them in your email earlier today. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Robin to take a look at our poll results.
Thanks very much, Adrienne. That's really interesting, or a very good overview of the CANIE Accord. So now we know what it's really about, how it's structured, and what you're committing to through the CANIE Accord. Let's see where we're at. So we've got, very high numbers of people who are replacing physical meetings with working online where possible, and that's wonderful. I think lots of us are in that situation. Also working from home a lot more, and that's probably, a very positive development in many senses. It's been challenging, but it's also had real benefits for the climate, and it's probably good sometimes to pause to think about the new ways of working together that we've learned over the past years. But what's really nice to see also is it's not just the online component, but people are advocating for climate action within the organization. So they're taking a stance on this. They may be attending meetings they might not have otherwise. They're pushing senior management, or if they're part of senior management, pushing their colleagues to take more climate action. Where we might have some areas to develop, let's see. I think decarbonization targets are just really tricky. And this is probably an area where we have to support each other. We can't just stop a lot of things we're doing. We can't stop flying, most of us, overnight. So we've got to support each other and look at how we've managed to reduce year on year and keep that process going over time. So that's maybe an area we can work together. But it's worth looking at two things at the bottom. Everybody's doing something. Nobody answered none of the above. So that's really positive. And there's a few people, 9 of us, who are lucky enough to work in an environment where they're doing all of these things. So that's really fantastic. And these people might have some experience and some expertise to share with other signatories of the Accord. So that's really positive to see what's going on. Now that you know more about where we're at and you know about the Accord, let's talk about how you could actually become a signatory, how you can get on board. We want to invite everyone here to become a signatory, and here's what you need to do to make that happen. So signatories to the Accord are required to agree to the article, to its key purpose and its principles. These are in essence its heart and soul. They represent a commitment to addressing climate action in your organization. Then you commit to at least 5 things that you are going to do. 5 things. They are spread out across 3 areas to ensure there's a broad, comprehensive approach in the organization. And that's it, okay? Sometimes climate action can induce anxiety about judgment. The risk is that this anxiety creates a reluctance to engage. None of us are perfect. Our organizations are not perfect. That's okay, but we shouldn't let that paralyze us. So let's emphasize the CANIE Accord is not about being at net zero yet. It's about providing the leadership, the transparency, and the accountability for the field of education to respond to the urgency of the climate change or the climate emergency in ways that we can, that we know we're capable of, and that represent the values that we hold. So by signing, you're not saying you've achieved net zero and you'll never fly anywhere again. But it's saying that you're taking this seriously, you're working on it, and you're going to keep doing better year after year. And the good thing is you'll join a community of organizations that are doing the same, will support one another, and will respond to the climate emergency together. So let's talk about the technical aspects. You're on board with this, you want to sign up. How do you do it? Well, you head over to CANIE.org, the CANIE website, and you'll be able to click through and find this form here, through which you acknowledge the purpose and principles of the Accord, and then you identify the areas where you are going to take action within your organization. You'll also be asked to upload or provide a link to a copy of your organization's sustainability strategy or policy as a way to kind of frame what you're doing. So that's it. Possibly we could post a link to this in the chat. So if you want to look through today, and see how you sign up, that would be available to you. And once you've done that, you'll receive a draft of your organization's commitments, which will be posted on the CANIE website eventually once you approve them. And then you will receive a snazzy, very attractive marketing toolkit to show the action that you are taking. This includes a signatory badge, social media assets, and email banners. So you can share this with people you're working with. And I think really importantly, you can share it with students. This sets a really clear example to students. It shows the types of values that your organization embodies and that you want to instill in them in the future. And as you do this, why not share it with other colleagues in the field? So use the CANIE Accord hashtag even after this event to highlight the progress that your organization is making. It's important to state that the Accord should be signed by organizations rather than by individuals. This ensures a greater level of buy-in, support, and sustainability. Where relevant, we encourage signing at the institutional level if possible, i.e. the whole university signing rather than perhaps the international office. We hope that this will help to mobilize support across the institution, for example, by getting the international office, the sustainability office, and perhaps academic departments departments all involved and on the same page. However, we recognize that's not always possible. I work in a university. I know they're very bureaucratic environments. So if you can't manage that, it's okay to sign just on behalf of one department or unit within the university. The good news is that when your organization signs up, you won't be the first ones. In fact, you'll be joined by an excellent community. We already have some signatories here, and you'll see these on the website. You can see that there's a range of organizations represented here. We have associations, we have institutions, we have providers and consultants, and we know that a lot more are on the way. We'll have the whole sector represented very soon. So you'll be in good company. And the good thing you could do, the best thing you could do, I would say, is to get in early. So in a few years, when this is the standard in the sector, you can say we were one of the first to sign, and that will really position you as a leader in the field. Signing something like this can be, an organizational process. It involves getting buy-in, commitment, holding discussions. And so I think it would be really useful to hear from some organizations that have signed up to get the leaders involved and hear their experience. So we're very lucky to have two signatories here today, Sebastian Fernandez from FPP EduMedia and Ainsley Moore from the University of Auckland's International Office. So I'd like to invite both of them to come on camera, if that's okay, and tell us a little bit about how they went about signing the CANIE Accord.
Thank you, Robin. So basically, the CANIE Accord, I had the honor to be invited to the Leaders Forum back in November, and it was great to see the start and the beginning of this. And it's been a tremendous work and a tremendous effort from all the CANIE team, which now I'm a proud member of as well. So the CANIE Accord, as you were saying, it creates a framework that allows us to streamline our decisions. And it was really, in our case, our organization, we're a rather small organization, so we could advance very fast into climate action. So from November till now, we saw the urgent need to take action, and we took it. We replaced absolutely all the events that we were organizing in person, connecting students and universities for virtual events, because that's also what we see that's going to be in the future. And we took also other bold actions into eliminating wallpaper, eliminating business cards, and so on. So I see the CANIE Accord as a great framework for the whole industry for taking action, which is what the planet is clearly asking us.
Great. Thanks, Sebastian. Such a clear, practical indication of the decisions and the rationale that went on there. So thank you. I'd now like to invite Ainsley Moore, the Director of International from University of Auckland, to tell us about the process there.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Sebastian. Kia ora tātou. Greetings from Waipapa Tamataro, the University of Auckland in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I lead the international office for the university and was very fortunate to be able to work in an environment where the international office was an early signatory to the CANIE Accord. Fortunate because I am passionate about international education. I believe that international education changes the lives of students, of institutions, of communities, and that it is vital that we continue to enable students to have an international learning experience, even whilst we combat what is, to paraphrase an Australian politician, the moral challenge of our time. We need to be engaging with climate action, and none of us gets a free pass because international education is important. We need to address both. And in my opinion, CANIE is a tremendous vehicle for us to do so collaboratively and together. When I think about the three principles of the CANIE Accord, to take immediate action, to collaborate, innovate, and educate, and to do so in the context of advancing social justice, it really resonates with what my institution is doing, but also what my international office is doing. And so before I go further, I want to acknowledge the work of the CANIE board, in particular, Atulia, who's with us here today, but also explicitly Adrienne for taking what was a tremendous amount of goodwill and energy from the COP26 Leaders Forums into what is now a document that we can all be proud of, and I think we can all progress and sign up to. As Robin was saying earlier, and indeed as Adrienne was saying earlier, the CANIE Accord is drafted in such a way that all of us can say yes to something. And so thinking about my advice to anybody here watching now, anybody considering joining and becoming a signatory to the CANIE Accord, just do it, just sign it, take the first step. That is the very least that we can all do together. And if you look at the document, we are all doing something already, and we can all find 5 things amongst those 70 that we can commit to doing over the coming year. My second piece of advice is join an Oceania. Sorry, that was a slip. Join a CANIE chapter. And if you happen to be in Oceania, join my CANIE chapter. That will help very much with the context of how we innovate and collaborate and educate together. We are all stronger for working together. And I have been delighted with the energy in Oceania chapter meetings and the ambition of chapter members to do something, and the ability for the CANIE Accord to really give us some direction about where to go next. I think lastly, I would say that don't be afraid. When you look at that list of what you can do, there are things you are already doing, but there are ambitious next steps. Just have a go. One of the things that brought me a great deal of delight last year was the University's Sustainability Office was looking to take a step from having a sustainability strategy that was just caught up inside their own world into a much broader document, which is a sustainability strategy for the whole university that was ambitious, that talked about net zero for everybody. And what delighted me was that in doing their work, they were told, oh, you have to talk to the international office. They're doing good things. So the fact that we had taken early steps has given us a place at the table for the strategy for the whole university. And I think that really speaks to what the CANIE Accord is trying to do, to use your influence, to use the benefit of the first early steps that you take to influence your larger institution. And beyond that, if you're an association, how you influence the actions of your membership. So I'm going to stop talking because I could go on forever now. I know that Adrienne only gave me 5 minutes, but to sum up, this is an incredible opportunity. I am delighted to be part of it, and I wish you all the best in joining the CANIE Accord as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Ainsley. That's a wonderful account of your rationales and what you've accomplished. It's just wonderful to hear that the international office at Auckland is kind of leading the way in terms of sustainability and is asked to serve as an example across the university. So congrats on that. And I think you put it so clearly when you said everyone can do something. That's what the CANIE Accord is about. We can all do something and we can help each other to keep doing more. Sorry. And so as you started by saying, I think also this is what international education is about. It reflects our values. It shouldn't be something which is seen as against internationalization. It's what a climate responsive mode of internationalization is, what it will have to look like in the future. So it's time that we started kind of laying the groundwork for that now and helping each other to do that. So thanks both to our signatories, our early signatories, for sharing your experience with everyone. I know that the example that you've set will help others to start the conversations in their organizations, to keep them going forward, to say there's other good organizations doing this and we should do it too. So thank you. Signing is a journey in many organizations, and the great thing is that we have 2 early signatories to the CANIE Accord here today to talk to us about their journeys to becoming a signatory. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Michelle Stewart, the president of EAIE, and Brett Berquist, the Assistant Vice Chancellor of Engagement from University of Canterbury in New Zealand. We'd like to hear from both of you about your journeys. We might have some questions for you. So Michelle, maybe you'd like to chip in first and tell us about the process at EAIE.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Robin, for the introduction. I think most people, I can see the names coming up, and I know a lot of people in the audience are familiar with EAIE. In terms of our journey, I think it's important to say that environmental sustainability is hardwired into the EAIE Strategy 2026, which includes an essential commitment to social responsibility and impact. And this extends to both the content of our services, programming and products, as well as our way of operating, how we go about our business. So I'd just like to give a couple of examples of how we do this. So in terms of content, I'd like to give some examples. So at our conference that's due to take place in Barcelona, we will have over 20 sessions addressing climate action, climate justice, sustainable development goals. And our theme for the spring 2022 issue of Forum, the EAIE publication due to be released next week, it addresses climate change. So the theme is our changing climate. And between 2020 and 22, we had multiple blogs, podcasts and webcasts addressing this issue. And one of the key themes addressed in the recent 2022 EAIE Community Summit looked at climate action. In fact, I think Robin and Ailsa were part of that. And that was a really great opportunity for people to find out about what others were doing and also to learn from best practices. In terms of our operations, the EAIE has committed to the SDGs since 2017, and we have detailed our commitment through our social responsibility webpage since April 2019. We also report on social responsibility and sustainability actions in our annual report. So that's something that we do regularly, and it's again part of our regular business. The conference is our opportunity to bring together content and operations. And so in the past, we have had concerted efforts to offset the carbon footprint through strategic choices of venues and catering. And that's again part of, that's something that we do every year when we're choosing our venues. In terms of the, I suppose that why did we want to sign the Accord? I think like everyone on the screen, we like you said, Robin, you know, we have to take action. It's not a choice. And I think for EAIE, it is a particular challenge because we have this huge conference and people come to that conference from all over the world. But the Accord, I think, does an excellent job touching on the major areas of interest in the sector, ranging from travel to operations to education. And I think really importantly, leadership. You know, you have to get people at a very senior level on board. And as a convener of meetings, the items related to climate-friendly travel and the enhancement of non-travel meeting solutions are very important to the EAIE and very relevant to the work that we do. But as an organisation focused on enabling the sector through cutting-edge content, the items focused on the development of climate action materials for international education practitioners, that's 67, and including climate action as a theme at conferences and events, 62, also resonate with the EAIE. And again, if any of you were able to attend the community exchange last year, we were very fortunate to have Mary Robinson as our keynote speaker, again, raising awareness of climate justice and intergenerational equity. So we're doing our very best to put these issues at the front of our thinking and the people that the audience we serve. In terms of thinking through advice for others and some of the challenges, I think for us, it's important to not, as somebody said in the chat, you know, you have to start somewhere. And I think for us, it's looking at the quick wins and also how to celebrate what you're doing and how to leverage those actions into other actions and also to secure buy-in from other people. And I think, again, from our lessons learned is taking the time to communicate what you're doing. Even though we've been doing things since 2017, some people were not aware of some of our efforts to offset carbon footprint of participants. So to really think through your communication plan and don't be shy about sharing and celebrating what you're doing as well. And don't assume that interested parties will somehow stumble upon what you're doing. You have to be upfront and really showcase what you're doing. And again, I think it's really important to celebrate and support early adopters or people who are doing interesting things in this space because they can become the champions for ongoing progress. So at the Climate Summit, I think it was University of Utrecht had put together a policy on virtual first. And I've been busy promoting that at my own institution and really saying to people, you know, this is a great example of how to address this. So again, celebrating what others are doing, sharing best practice, I think is really important. I think it's also really crucial to recognise that there are significant challenges, and I would describe those in terms of this tension between the financial costs of doing things and also time pressure. So if I give you the example of, say, coming to a conference, sometimes if you have the financial wherewithal to attend a conference in another country, sometimes you don't have the time. So it's trying to balance those two different things. And also, I think some of the infrastructural barriers are still there. And again, we need to do what we can to ensure that we try and reduce those as much as possible. But as I say, the EAIE is delighted to be part of this. We really welcome what you're doing and are really in awe of what you've achieved in quite a short period of time. So I think really a big thank you from the EAIE to everyone involved at CANIE.
Thanks, Michelle. So wonderful to hear about your journey. And the EAIE is such a central organization in the field. You know, so many institutions and professionals connect through it. So to have that and to have you involved at an early stage is going to be such a huge win, I know, for the CANIE Accord. And it's great just to hear about how many things are going on. You know, that's really impressive. And like you say, it's good to highlight that so that people know about it and perhaps they see the example and they follow. So thanks so much. That's wonderful. Let's hand it over to Brett Berquist from Canterbury. Brett, tell us about your journey to the CANIE Accord.
Now mai harimai tēnā koutou katoa. I greet you in Te Reo Māori, the indigenous language of Aotearoa, New Zealand. It's great to see so many familiar faces on this call. I feel like it's a big meeting of the gospel choir and we could all break into song at any moment. I think all of us have been very involved in these topics, supporting our evangelistic, charismatic speakers, those who have the CANIE background, if they've followed the instructions and done what they're supposed to for the Zoom call. This is an interesting space for me, and it's the first time I'm speaking about this topic at my new institution, the University of Canterbury. So I was very involved with CANIE at my previous institution, the University of Auckland, and I believe my good friend and colleague Ainsley Moore spoke on the previous session a few hours ago. And we've finished up a chapter on this topic in a book that Karen McBride and Pitulia Nicola have edited that will be published by the Forum on Education Abroad sometime later this year. So we spent a lot of time thinking about these things. And I guess the why of it, and to come back to where to start and the commentary about don't aim for perfection, I think you need to start with the baseline. You know, figure out where you're at. Just you know, take the measures that you can. If you don't have agreement on how you're counting things, start with one. You know, take the bull by the horns, put something out there. Other parts of the university will respond, probably vehemently, when you start doing that. But if you can find some common ground in that space, you just need to find the baseline and then reach for the next rung on the ladder. I like the way the Accord is presented, having just spent a bit of time, actually a few hours, sort of reviewing. I could have answered the questions fairly easily from Auckland, where I was working for the past 7 years, and doing it here after 2 months at the University of Canterbury was quite an eye-opening exercise for me. But I had a lot of good colleagues who helped weigh in on that. And so going item by item and answering yes, no, not applicable, I have no idea, under those categories of, you know, good enough, better, nirvana was really quite an informative exercise. I felt like it was a bit of a shortcut into the homework I needed to do on sustainability in my institution. So those of you who might be thinking about all the politics on your campus and, oh my gosh, how would I ever get through this? Well, even just going through them item by item and asking yourself the question, where am I now? Who else could help me determine where I'm at? Would be a really interesting educational exercise in and of itself. And there are a number of questions where I wanted to say, yes, oh, no, that was Auckland. No, Canterbury, oh, it's a bit different here. So really contextualizing that inside your setting in and of itself is a really, really useful exercise to do. Then I guess on the question as to why are we interested in signing at this point, I guess I would say there's no better time. I'll leave others to speak with more passion about the urgency of it all. I think there's stuff about that in the press every single day, and there's better experts on this call today than me. But for New Zealand, we are probably in the middle of the most significant reset of international education we've ever experienced. We currently have less than 10% of our previous levels of international students onshore. So 90% of our market has exited these islands. So, you know, that's a bit of a crisis for where we're going in terms of our day jobs and recruitment and so on. But what better time when you've really sort of turned the machine off for a minute, what better time to rethink about how you're going to do it when you turn the machine back on? So there's quite a conversation going on institutionally, and even with our government around what we're calling a reset of international education in New Zealand, and really thinking through where that's going and what we're going to do in that space. That's certainly the case at the University of Canterbury. We're a small country. We only have 8 universities. All of them are public. There actually previously have been more international enrollments in the sub-university sector than the university sector up until a couple of years ago. So it's a bit of a different setting compared to other countries. But we're situated in a country that has set a carbon neutral goal for 2050, a government which passed a bill announcing it intended to be carbon neutral by 2025, and my university has set a goal to be carbon neutral by 2030. I think we're actually going to achieve that. Things I can't talk about yet, but there's a couple of big steps where we might be able to move much more quickly towards that. All 8 universities, then, not surprisingly, if our government is doing this and leading by example, all 8 New Zealand universities have also set a carbon neutral target. The only institution which hasn't set a date on that yet, and I can say this now that I'm no longer employed by the University of Auckland, is Auckland. So the other 7 universities have set a clear line in the sand in terms of where they're going. So it's quite a unique setting here in New Zealand in that all the public unis are all in, the government is all in. We're not in the middle of is climate action needed? Is it real? It's about how do we get there? And some of the conversations around what matters and how we get there are very different. How we talk about water, the importance of our dairy industry. CJ knows how much I like to talk about methane and cow farts. That's a big part of the conversation here in New Zealand. You see it in primetime TV. My favorite show, Country Calendar, it's been running for 30 years in New Zealand, Sunday after the news. And last Sunday, it was all about Stewart Island and starting an algae farm because algae produces 90% less methane when fed to dairy. So it's a mainstream conversation here in New Zealand and what that means for climate action. So it's a bit different compared to some other countries. In Canterbury, the University of Canterbury is a leader in many research areas like microplastics, green hydrogen, lots of different spaces. We have a couple of leading researchers who have co-authored parts of different ICC reports. So a very willing community of scientists who find their very research career there. And we also have appointed what we believe is New Zealand's first senior leadership position to be focused solely on sustainability. So Professor Jan Evans-Freeman is Pro-Vice Chancellor of Sustainability. So sustainability sits inside the senior leadership portfolio in various components across New Zealand, but we're the first to have appointed someone whose sole focus every day is on sustainability. The SDG research area is of importance to all New Zealand universities. All 8 universities placed in the top 300 in the Times Higher impact rankings. Auckland led as #1 for the first 2 years. And Canterbury, it's officially embargoed, but Canterbury is anticipating some very good news coming forward in a couple of weeks' time when the new Times Higher rankings come out. So it's a space that all New Zealand universities are engaged in. We see an interest in the research and an increasing interest in positioning that within the core brand attributes of the university. In that space, it also means it's an interesting way to collaborate together. So there's a lot of networking that happens across the 8 universities, both in terms of research and positioning. We have agreement with our Crown agency, Education New Zealand, to position sustainability as a core brand attribute for attracting students here. But at the same time, the carbon footprint to even get here, to even set foot in our country, is probably bigger than most countries could imagine. There's no taking the train instead of the plane to get to New Zealand. You could perhaps row, but it would take a while to get here. So it's just core essential to what we're doing, and we really applaud this effort. And I guess my main message is to take baby steps, go through the accord. The bar is set at a reasonable level. Just committing to 5 to 8 actions across the different criteria. I think when you read that, you'll find that number fairly easily. And then you can set yourself a goal of going for the next one and the next one. And having an accord like that will definitely empower your conversations with other parts of your institution. So, give it a go. I found it really stimulating to go through the process of signing it electronically. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Brett. It's wonderful to hear that, you know, this moment's being used, as you say, as a reset to rethink about how you're doing things and to see it as an opportunity. So that's very exciting. And also it's, you know, very insightful to hear that it's not just something you're signing up to, but a way to actually kind of review the organization, perhaps to learn more about your organization, to learn about how things work and review where you're at. So the process of signing can actually be kind of a learning process too. Really great advice from both our signatories there. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and the leadership you're taking. So you've heard about the CANIE Accord. You know why it's important. You know what's involved in signing, and you've heard from some signatories. Now it's time to hear from everyone else in the room. We are going to pose 2 questions that we would like you to discuss in breakout rooms. These are, first, what are some challenges that you anticipate signing the Accord? And how can CANIE help to address them? Sorry, how can CANIE help to address them? That's in bold, which just underscores the fact that CANIE is here to help. It's a very positive environment. And if you've got questions, as Ainsley said, that the regional chapters are active, you've got people who can support you. And second, what are some anticipated opportunities signing? I already said universities are bureaucratic organizations. Ainsley might experience that too. I'm sure in other parts of the sector, there are other challenges. So what are the challenges that you're facing? And then what are the opportunities? Okay, so what might this offer to you? Are you setting a better example for your students? Are you working in new ways that are actually more efficient? Are you perhaps more true to the ethos of internationalization? All of these, you know, and therefore more kind of engaged and inspired in your work. These are all important. So what are some of the opportunities of signing? So we're going to give you 15 minutes to discuss those in groups. And in each group, we'll have a CANIE facilitator, someone from CANIE who can help you to distill the thoughts, who can maybe get the discussion going if you need some fodder. So you'll have somebody there to help. And then we'll feedback by questions for about 10 minutes. So question by question, we'll look through these and talk about the discussions about the challenges that you anticipate and how CANIE can help. And then what are the opportunities involved in signing. So I'm going to go ahead and open the breakout rooms now. Enjoy speaking to one another, benefit from each other's experiences, and I'll look forward to hearing about it afterwards. Welcome back, everybody. Oops. Good to see you back here. We had a lot of people in the breakout rooms right up until the end, so I take it that there were some good conversations happening, and it would be good to hear about what people thought about our questions. So we've got, we're going to structure our discussion by questions here and just feedback some key points. So I will read the first question, and then feel free to put up your hand if you have something to share. CANIE facilitators, if you want to feedback on behalf of your group, that's wonderful too. So first, what are some challenges you anticipate with signing the Accord, and how can CANIE help to address them?
Well, I'm happy to jump in.
Yeah.
I wanted to give people a beat and represent my little group. I also peeked at the notes, and I think a lot of institutions have some shared challenges, but I wanted to share a couple of kind of exceptions that we might not have thought about that would make it easier for institutions to sign. So one is the option to sign as the international office, as opposed to trying to get the entire institution to sign. So a friendly reminder, I guess, that you could just push for your department to sign as opposed to trying to rally the entire institution. And then the other thought was about a consortium signing. So turns out, yes, you could have a consortium, an association sign. We were talking about Study California, for example. That doesn't have to necessarily be just one institution or one department within that. So I thought those were really cool ways for addressing those challenges.
Those are really good points. Thanks, Amy. And I think you're absolutely right about the top university level is where all the bureaucracy seems to live, or maybe a better way to say it, international offices are the most dynamic and responsive parts of universities. The rest of them tend to move really slowly and have lots of committees. And so if that becomes too much to deal with, really good to sign as an international office and maybe even have a longer conversation with the university so that in some time they would sign. And yeah, we're all members of consortia and such, and it would be good to sign in that way too. So really good points. Thanks. And I see Janelle Chapman's got a hand up. Thanks, Janelle.
Thanks a lot. Our group thought that one of the biggest issues is obviously about the bureaucracy and having approval processes go through. So, it's been identified already to have maybe the international office drive that. I think it's important to not only talk about universities, that there are a whole heap of other institutions within this international industry that are very engaged and want to be part of this. So sometimes by the language that's used, it might exclude some of the other components of the sector as well. So I think that's really important. We did discuss at length about the fact that often the decision makers in these big institutions and groups want to travel. So to change that mindset about, them and the word ego was used, but we won't record that. But it is about, changing the mindset of the people who are the decision makers to ensure that that message then gets filtered down. Often it's about a small team finding the time to be able to be part of this, but we did say that there are opportunities about the fact that, there are plenty of little things that we can do to make changes, and it only takes a small change for a number of us to make, to have that global impact eventually. And the opportunities certainly for profiling and promoting any conversation is a good conversation about this, because it means that more people become aware of it. Thank you.
All good points, Janelle. I particularly agree with the last one. And I think one of the good changes that CANIE has brought about is the conversations happening. It's better than all of us kind of watching films about climate change, documentaries, reading the news, getting very worried, and then going to work and saying nothing. So if we're talking, that's a very good thing. And I agree with everything else you said, particularly about yes, higher education, international education is not just universities. You know the sector more than I do. I think it's a very broad sector. We've got people working in all different types of organizations, and all should be playing a part. So thanks, Janelle. And Tracy, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. I wanted to also pick up on that point that Janelle and you were making about the non-university sector, because my group were all from outside the university sector, and we talked about the potential. So there's a challenge because people might see this as just being a university thing, but it's also an opportunity, because then there's an opportunity to expand and have more people join this and join the commitment. And EJ, you can also speak up later if I miss anything. The other thing that we talked about was just in the other challenge that we have in the current environment coming out of COVID is there are so many competing priorities, and how do we make sure that we can get ourselves on board, our organisations on board, when we've got funding agencies that might be asking us to do different things, or owners that are wanting us to focus on other things. How can we, and again, we saw this as both a challenge but also as an opportunity, that we need to carve out some time and space to be able to look at this as something that's really important for us to do. But it's not going to be easy and again, coming out of COVID, a lot of us have lost staff over that time. So we've got less resources. So how do we make sure that we can engage in this to the maximum that we need to engage?
Really good points. Thanks, Tracy. I agree. I mean, we do have so many competing priorities. And I guess one thing I've experienced, I don't know about everyone else, but these priorities never go away. So if you have some targets and you meet them, the targets will be higher or different next year. So in a way, that means even though it's a difficult time in the sector, I agree, it's a good time to start engaging with this. And thanks, Tracy, for those points. Sebastian, tell us about what you were discussing.
Yeah. Thank you. So part of our consideration on the challenges were exactly about finding, the changes between smaller organizations and bigger organizations. Of course, in the bigger, people spoke already, buying in the leaders and trying to get them to agree. And sometimes in the smaller organizations, the getting the funding and also the time with other priorities, finding the right time to get that done. But something that it's good that CANIE, in my opinion, has already done, and we discuss about that, is that the language of the accord and the language, the whole, it's easy to understand and it's easy to apply for any organization in that sense. And in terms of opportunities, here maybe Pitula can also comment, but the greatest is, of course, that we see is that presence to students as well and to the whole industry, that the topic is finally on the table. This was for many people considered like somebody else's problem, and it's not. It's a clear point that action can be taken no matter how small it is. If you take one small step, then the next ones will be easier.
That very wise words there, Sebastian. I agree completely. And I think as a teacher, someone who spends a lot of time in classrooms, kind of the first law of teaching maybe is practice what you teach, right? And if we're not living the values that we want our students to live, then we're compromised in a way and we're not doing our job. So this is a great way to live those values. And Eddie, great to see you. Tell us about your discussion.
All right. Yeah, great to see you and everyone, Robin. So we had a really great discussion too. And as far as this first question about challenges, some of this has already been mentioned by other groups, but certainly if you are working at a university and a big one in particular, that you can run into a lot of bureaucracy and time that is needed to gain approvals by broader collective of folks if we wanted to make an institution-wide commitment. But even just time that will be needed to educate other colleagues who won't know about the Accord, won't really know or be familiar with CANIE, and might say, well, that sounds great, but what's up with this? So that takes time. That takes time to do that educational process. So that's a barrier to taking, or a challenge to taking immediate action. One of us mentioned that it was great to see EAIE listed as one of the early preliminary signatories, and the suggestion was made that getting that on the CANIE website and getting that word out will help kind of pressure, quote unquote, others or encourage others to sign on, because that's a name brand, right? See, wow, this is a serious thing that EAIE is also taking seriously. Additionally, another challenge was related to power dynamics. And one of us, if not a few of us in the group, said that, we are just one person in our respective area that has real passion for this, and yet maybe not oodles and oodles of authority to make decisions. So again, that process of getting more buy-in and getting additional help and allyship and taking up the cause will be important. As far as how CANIE can help address the challenges, one person not so jokingly remarked, with unpaid labor. So helping the cause by contributing expertise, but a very tangible example that was put out was diversity abroad. And I don't think I realized this, but when you become a member of Diversity Abroad, then you have more immediate or direct access to expertise, where they'll meet with you to help you kind of strategize about how to go about this. So that model was suggested. Last, real quickly, because I know we're running out of time, as far as opportunities, all of us agreed that just having, being out in front of the curve, so to speak, is going to have reputational benefits, because younger people are looking to all of us to do more. And this way you can say, from a sort of PR-ish perspective, you can do more. One other concrete example that was news to me was awesome. Suggestion that other accrediting bodies, in this example it was AACSB, the business school accrediting body, they include climate commitments as part of their accreditation requirements, and sort of saying to your colleagues in the business area, in that case, hey, this Accord can help you meet those requirements. Loved that suggestion. So
that's a great point. And maybe it's something we should do, is reach out to the accreditation agencies and say, here's something you might suggest, I guess, to business schools in that case. Yeah, really good points there. I agree, having EAIE on board initially is huge. University of Auckland is a wonderful university, well respected around the world. So thanks, Ainsley. I know Bristol is a partner of Auckland through the World University Network, and it will be much easier to start if I say Auckland's doing it, it's much easier. So getting these people on board early is really huge. And I have great news. Even since we've been talking, we have another signatory, the Green Program, which runs a lot of innovative study abroad programs dealing with sustainability. They've signed just in the past hour. And that's a good example of a non-university organization that's very involved in international organization. It shows that there's a lot of different stakeholders to whom the accord applies. So we've got one final question to ask you before we let you go, and that is whether or not you think your organization is likely to be able to get on board with the CANIE Accord. And it's going to pop up here. I'll give you a minute to fill that out. And while you do that, I'll also just pause to say if you have any questions you want to ask in the chat, please go ahead and do that. I'll stick around. If you have to go, it's okay. But before you go, I want to take a moment to thank CANIE for all the work it does. It is a lot of unpaid labor, and it has such a positive ethos, and they accomplish so much that I think they need recognition. Particularly, I'll echo Ainsley in thanking Adrienne for her inspiring leadership in bringing the CANIE Accord to where it is today. And we've got the poll results up. So we've got 29 plus 59% say very likely or likely. So that's up to 78%. We've got 12 who maybe it might be a bit of a stretch for. Those could be people we need to support. So get in touch if we can support you. But that's a positive sign. And I think CANIE will, as much as possible, follow up. Take this as your invitation, okay? You're the ones we've been waiting for. So start the conversations. You're invited. We want you if you're here today. So do sign up. So yes, huge thanks to Adrienne. Thanks to CJ for all she does. She's a very dynamic individual, accomplishes so much. And thanks to everyone else from CANIE. It's run by people with busy demands on their time, and we're grateful and impressed by all the work they do. There's one more person to thank, and that's you for making the time wherever you are in the world. I know you're busy, and the fact that you wanted to be here today and that you're willing to take this forward is really important. So thank you. And I hope to see your name on the CANIE website or the name of your organization in the very near future.
And thank you to Robin for putting this on and dedicating so much time and energy to CANIE. Thank you so much.
So welcome back. I hope you had a good discussion, that this was an opportunity to cross-fertilize some different ideas. I'd like to just open it up for discussion now. So whether it's CANIE facilitators or participants, if there are any key responses to either of these questions, I think we should open it up for discussion. Feel free to either put a point into the chat or to put up your hand if you'd like to participate. It would be great to hear from you. Great, Vivian, great to see you again. Thanks for being here today, and tell us about your discussion.
Thanks, and I should also apologise for being late. One of the wonderful things about being live to return to face-to-face meetings is you have to put in travel time, which I keep forgetting to do, so I'm really sorry about that. We had a really good discussion about, I guess, you know, there's sort of how do you get a bit of momentum in an institution where actually some of the people who need to do something are dealing with other really quite significant challenges. So one of our colleagues, Robin, in our session was talking about you know, the difficulty of getting responses from colleagues who were just trying to get international education started, and the sort of, we talked a lot about the power that the network could have in helping sort of build legitimacy around this and helping us to kind of galvanise institutional decision making. Neither of us have signed the protocol yet. In our case, we're sort of now looking at this revised draft, and we need to have a few conversations with our network of members. We also talked about how CANIE can help, and I think the power of the network, the creation of the toolkit, the workspace, and benchmarking, I think will help both at the level of associations and also individual institutions. And then we talked about the kind of the impetus for it, and I think both of us feel that, you know, we don't want to be the bad guys, right? We can see this as a problem just like everybody else, and we don't want to be reactive to other people saying, you should be doing more. It's much better that we're out there on the front foot trying to address this. Interestingly, this comes up a lot in the UK, but my colleague Robin talked about students and younger staff members demanding it of us. So I thought that was something that resonated with us too.
I think that's a really powerful point. Yeah, you know, our accountability to students is so important, and they know about this. If you followed the school strikes for the climate change, you know it's important to young people today. So we need to be active and get out in front of it, as Vivian says. Thanks so much, Vivian. David, I saw your hand up next.
Okay, thank you so much. In my group, we tried to share experience and looked at some of these questions. And one of the key challenges that we actually highlighted, or that came out of the discussion, is the challenge of convincing the management of the university, especially if they don't have a lot of information about this accord and the benefits. And so, because their commitments, quite often university governance systems are always very skeptical about commitments because they tend to think about resources that might actually be required to do this, and also other aspects to do with the whether it will be supported by the governance itself or not. So one of the key things that we thought that maybe CANIE could actually be able to support in terms of providing as much information as possible to support management of the universities to be able to understand how important it is, and also to be able to show the university the benefits that come with the university being part of this. And I think that's something that we need to actually be talking about. Having some meetings, online meetings, maybe with a specific institution might also be very helpful. Like, for example, CANIE can organize a meeting with one of the vice presidents of a university and support the other team to be able to convince the university to sign this accord. But there are so many opportunities that we identified that come with signing. One of them, of course, is around ranking of the university. Now, ranking of the university is going into looking at ways, measuring the levels at which the university is contributing to global issues like sustainability, climate change, and others. And so that becomes an opportunity. But the other one is also cascading the accord and its commitments to the individuals within the university, the individual staff, the individual students, the individual units and support staff, all of them being able to do something about climate change. So those are some of the opportunities that we thought in our group that are very, very key.
Thanks so much, David. Really insightful comments there around both the challenges and opportunities, and some good steers for CANIE on what CANIE can do. We have just a couple more minutes left, so it'd be great to hear from Douglas and Jenny. And when we do that, we're going to launch one more poll just to see where you're at in terms of signing. Do you think this is something you can do, or is it going to be a little bit difficult? So we'll launch the poll, and then over to you, Douglas, and then Jenny.
Thanks so much, Robin. And again, very much echoing some of the points that we've heard from Vivian and from David so far. One of the things that we were talking about was the really crowded leadership agenda, and how do we actually make sure that we have the mental space to actually fit in that conversation with that leadership agenda, but also that we create the space for the leaders to actually think about it. And we recognize that actually on many of our campuses, there's a sustainability or a sustainability office. We really need to, with the topic, have them as champions, not being the only champions, being from the international kind of part of the university. We had a couple of members in our group who are from membership organisations, so the Universities UK, the International Association of Universities, and they're challenged then at actually wondering whether they can sign on behalf of all of their members or not, or whether they can only really sign as the organisation itself. In terms of support from CANIE, there was a really good suggestion which we didn't get to flesh out, about having some type of decision tree for institutions. The framework, the accord, is kind of fairly complex, so actually trying to kind of help guide people to make decisions. And then, as been said already, the opportunity for CANIE maybe to run some online workshops, to invest in professional learning so that we can get the message out at that kind of ground up level. And Betty was suggesting we actually target the teaching and learning units in universities rather than the leadership on that front. And again, support with some of those leadership conversations. Could it be an opportunity for a CANIE board member to come in and help some of those conversations on our campuses? That's all from me.
Great, thanks, Douglas. Jenny, anything to add? You had your hand up.
Oh, I was going to say I'll put it in the chat, but there was the member organisations that was in our room was asking if they don't have a sustainability strategy already, it may be quite helpful if there's any templates or any resources that CANIE can share around that. But we also had a student in the room who felt that they didn't necessarily have a voice with their institution. So I think for those of us from higher education institutions, trying to make sure the student voice is included when making a decision to sign would be fantastic.
Really important points. Thanks. That's good, and we'll think about the template. I'll follow up with CJ about that. So we're out of time, and I know you're all very busy people. I just wanted to wrap up by thanking a few people. I'd like to thank Adrienne for the fantastic work and the leadership she's done by taking the CANIE Accord to where it is today. You know, it's ready to go. We have signatories coming in. Since we've been holding today's events, we've had new organizations sign, and we hope that you will join them. Huge thanks to CJ for all she's done and for being part of today's presentation. And finally, thanks to all of you, because I know you're very busy, but I know this is important to you too, and that's why you're here today. And so I'm very grateful for that and hope to see you as a signatory of the Accord soon. So thanks very much. Have a good day wherever you are, and see you soon.